That's just a freeze frame.
All right.
Yeah.
There we go.
Welcome to You Won't Hate It, where we talk about life through the lens of pastors at the length of a cigar. I'm Josh.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Floyd.
I'm Joe. Yes. So, Ryan.
This will be a little shorter.
It will be. And this is the last one of before we take a break for summer.
Yeah, we're going to take, we'll be back mid-July-ish.
Yep. This is a little bit of break time here.
Yeah.
That's good. You just filled that up and now it's not working, so that's perfect.
Mad right now.
Did you bleed it?
I did.
Yeah. I actually wanted to weirdly start. I heard an interesting would you rather, so I'm going to throw this off for the last one. And I asked Lisa, and it kind of threw her as well, but would you rather eat a baby goat
Oh, my gosh. Okay.
or eat a matter baby? Which one?
Oh, Matter Baby?
Yeah.
So dumb.
Well, I don't know what a Matter Baby is.
I'm mad about it.
You don't know what a baby goat is?
I know what a baby goat is.
Oh, well then what's the...
I'm
I don't get it.
angry
Why
at
is
what's
not-
happening
I
right
don't get
now.
why you're not understanding it.
I'm very mad about what's going
Just
on.
let him
It's a
finish.
baby goat.
Yeah.
Or, you don't know what a baby goat is?
I know what a baby goat
Oh,
is.
then what don't you understand?
I'm going to punch him.
What?
You should.
What? I don't understand what you don't understand.
What's the second thing you said?
A matter baby. So it's a baby goat or a matter baby?
Yeah, I don't know what a Matter Baby is.
Nothing. What's the matter with you, baby?
No, you
didn't set
tried
it
to
up?
force
No.
it.
I
It didn't work.
I couldn't get him to do it. I couldn't get him
I like
You
it.
go,
he didn't do
what's the matter, baby?
Nothing, sugar. What's the matter
Nothing,
with you?
it. Well, the thing I like
The
is
problem
that...
is I was excited for the would you rather. and
Well,
I'm like,
you're asking...
Thank you for
in
joining
our-
us for You Won't Hate It.
You're asking an Armenian if they would eat a baby goat, and I'm like, yes
Yeah.
to number
Yeah.
one.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I would.
Mutton curry all day long.
sounds amazing. I don't know if did we already say this is going to be the last episode for the summer?
We did, but you can say it again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, just repeating for people.
Hey,
who weren't
welcome to the
listening.
podcast.
Before,
Hey, everybody,
before the
this
joke.
is going to be
Hey,
the
would you
last.
rather eat a baby goat?
This is going to be the last podcast for the summer.
Yep.
It's actually just for a month. We're going to take about a month break.
Yeah, it's no problem. All fun.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
So what's on your mind,
If the
folks?
spark is going perfectly.
I don't know either, but
Where
this
is
is the
it
wrong
sparking
time.
to?
This is
Put
the
it up
wrong
to your
time to
ear
fix
and
this.
click it.
No,
That's what. No, I was listening.
this
for the,
is the wrong time to fix this.
no,
the right
no.
time.
What is the thing that's been on your mind? Or open with the mic
Yeah.
finger if he's stalling so much with his
Right.
I'm
torch.
so angry. Okay. First of all, I need a lighter from somebody. Does anyone have a lighter I can use?
Yes. High note. Oh,
But
I love
Josh
it.
is going to use.
This is.
Oh. No, that's
it's
good.
turned up to way too high.
Let's end on
Because
a
you-
high note. I
Okay.
like this.
So we can talk about this. When is it okay to leave your church? So
All right, we've already talked about.
I
when
wanna
it's
give-
okay to abandon your family. So now we're doing when is it okay?
I want to
leave your
give
church?
background.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this for a while. Floyd, for those that don't know, we haven't said anything about this on the podcast yet, I don't think, right?
Not at all, no.
So Floyd is stepping down as our executive pastor.
Yes.
And when and this is good, he got his doctorate, so he's pursuing his career. He has an awesome app that he's working on that he wants to do called mobile mentoring. So it's like,
Mobile Mentor. You can actually follow it right now
Yeah.
on Instagram.
so it's awesome. So he's pursuing that. We love it. And at first he was like, well, since I'm leaving the church, I have to, or since I'm stepping down, I have to leave the church. Like, you can't do it. And we've since he's staying, which we're all like super stoked about. His whole family will be here. We're stoked.
Mixed into there's a merge, and some people are not sure if they wanted to stay over a merge. So there are
Yeah.
two things happening, and people deciding, do I want to stay or go?
And we've lost people from the merge.
Yeah.
And it just got me thinking, because like one of the conversation I had with Floyd was like, hey, we got really close in this time that you were on staff. And I'm like, it didn't sit right with me, because I'm like, we say this as a family. And I know not for everybody, for church is church for some people, it's
Yeah.
family for some.
But especially for us. I mean,
Absolutely.
we're close.
Yeah. And so
really
I'm like,
close.
man, I just hated that thought. We talked through it. He decided to stay. We're all stoked. But then I thought, what is the reason to leave? Because I've been in a lot of churches that talked about like, we're family until something went wrong and it was
Right.
bail. And I'm like, and it always was weird because I used to say all the time, like, okay, you and I do family different then. Like, I don't bail on the family because you can't. That's one of the beautiful things about family. So
Yeah.
church has had that vibe to me where it's like, if we're family, we figure this out. But at some point, it has to be okay to leave. And when is that point? What are the things, the topics, the issues? We've had multiple people leave the church because of a joke that I made. Like, I'll just
Today.
it's okay. Exactly. I apologized for it like crazy. It was a stupid mistake. I shouldn't have done it. I feel like an idiot about
Let me
it.
ask you a quick question about that. Should you apologize publicly? I'm literally giving you two, because like people are making that the thing because you made the joke publicly. Should you apologize publicly? And that's even a good question for pastors. Like, when do I You apologized to plenty of people individually. The person you were teasing didn't take any offense to it. They knew you were joking.
I have thought about it. I was going to apologize for it the next time I preached, but because we had such a long break, it was like 4 weeks. And I actually thought, you know what? It'd be stupid to bring this up again. Because for most people, it's out of their mind. And so I'm like, I actually had a conscious thought and went, it seems dumb to me to bring it back up when the dust had settled. I'd already talked to a bunch of people.
Right.
There were a couple people, though, that were like, you should have apologized. And I was like, oh. So I still might, is what's funny. But it's more of I'm not sure if I should have. I actually, here's the hard part. It was really stupid. I made a mistake. Like, it's a joke not landing. It wasn't some immoral act.
When you're funny, like when it's funny and people laugh at it, it's no big deal.
Yeah.
Because people just didn't receive it well. It came across as harsh.
And I struggle because I do think it was harsh. I think it was stupid. But I also go, hey, guys, I didn't have like a moral failure. I didn't do something massive. I hurt someone's feelings, and it was really, really stupid.
And it was intended in humor because you love the guy.
Yeah, exactly.
The person who the joke was about, you did not hurt his feelings.
Right.
He did not take any offense at it whatsoever.
Right. And again, I fully own it. It was dumb, and it was a mistake. But I'm kind of like, hey, what's the like? Again, and I get that you're upset for him. I totally understand that. I apologize to him. And then with the people that I found out that had a problem with, like, I'm still calling people. This was a month ago. I'm still calling people, being like, hey, I'm really sorry, when I find out that they were upset or they are upset.
Right.
Because it was stupid. I owe them an apology. Absolutely. But it got me thinking, like, is that a poor joke or something a pastor says that's really dumb? Let's say theologically it's fine, but they just say something really stupid. Is that a reason to leave the church? If not, what is? When is that point where you're like, this is worth leaving? Because again, there should be. It's not like you're married to the church. You should have outs.
Right. Some of you
So
aren't.
what are those? Yeah, we are.
We have a different rule here. Did you just become a member? It's
there's-
called a bride.
There's different reasonings, whether you're moving towns, obviously this
Not
is
a good enough reason.
in regards to just making the
There are
conscious
trains,
decision.
planes, and automobiles, Josh.
Yes,
Great movie.
When you're making the decision out of choice, but still in town, just choosing to go to a different church out of hurt or offense. I don't know. That's a hard.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. It's just a hard thing to process.
Can you pick a line for
are-
you? Let me just make it personal. Like, anecdotally, what would you say is that probably help if you're going to try and figure out what other people do? It's like, where is the line for you? There's a quadrant they talk about in terms of like people's success at church.
Sure.
You like the pastor, you like the worship, you like the children's, and you can like 2 of those and be successful at church.
I think when we talk about like affinity and the aspect of like I've thought about on Sundays I'm off, just visiting the church that I grew up in, just for nostalgia and just for fun, just to see people I used to know.
Yep.
But then
I wouldn't go there as
we'd fire you if you did that.
I wouldn't go there as my home church. It's just I can't imagine.
So you think they'd let you back in? I just didn't realize that
It's
was
possible.
a given.
I could sneak in. I could sneak in. The back
I'm
door.
pretty sure they'd notice you.
Yeah, they would.
At your
They would.
German Lutheran church, they might notice.
Well, they have a
yeah.
whole Hmong congregation.
Oh,
did they
so
really?
it sounded kind of racist because you're Korean. So
Well,
I don't know.
I could definitely sneak in.
Okay.
So, but the idea of like, there are some valid reasonings that some people have brought up, but it's worth the conversation, and I think there still can be restoration in that. It's not the first decision.
I think that's the key for me. Like, I don't mind people leaving. And the reason that I felt like I had to leave, didn't want to, but felt like I had to leave because we've never been in a high level position in a church and then resigned that position and been able to stay. I know youth pastors, church secretaries, people like that have resigned a position and then felt like they had to leave the church.
Yeah.
And Stephanie said to me, hey, First Street Church has been different in every other way. What if it's different in this way too? And that was the end of a culmination of things that happened that caused us to realize that we could stay. But when somebody leaves, I don't mind as much somebody leaving as when they just disappear.
Yeah.
I want you to sit down and have a conversation, be man enough, be woman enough, be an adult, and have a conversation with people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I was actually really proud of the last person who left.
Yes.
Called us to have a meeting. I still wish it wouldn't have gone down this way, but She was really open, really honest, and
we
really
left the door
upfront.
open for them, saying like, "Hey,
100%.
you've not closed this door.
Exactly.
Like,
It
we
still
want
is.
you here."
I actually think she did that right. Is how I felt. Where I was like,
Ryan usually needs somebody to prove it to him why they can leave. So he's a little different than
100%.
anybody else. He's like, okay,
Yeah.
I need 5 reasons why you can leave. Not that you are leaving.
What's
why
funny?
You can leave.
You know that my favorite, truthfully, I think the best, if someone were to say, no one ever has, by the way, but if someone were to just walk in and be like, I don't like this anymore. It's like, how come? I just don't like it. I don't like the way I'd be like, oh, I can't argue with that.
valid.
But they always have these reasons where I'm like, well, that's not a good enough. You know, it's little where I'm always like, I need more.
Don't you feel like most of the time the reasons that they give are not actually the real reason?
Most
That's
of
hard
the
to
time.
say. It's like
Yes.
breaking up with a girlfriend.
Yeah.
You're just kind of like, oh, it's not you, it's
And
me.
sometimes you don't. They don't want to be rude and
Yeah.
say like, I don't like your preaching anymore. And
Which
it's
they
like
could. That's a
They
that's
tell
a real
girlfriends?
option.
Yeah.
to your girlfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's all good stuff. I don't think.
The people who are here say that.
Right.
Like, I don't like your preaching. So that's like,
When I was at Willow,
Why don't you leave?
when I was at Willow, and it was obviously huge, I just got saved, and it was this massive church, and I was part of the basketball ministry, so I was a part of that the whole time. But I do remember feeling like, and it didn't cause me to leave the church, but I remember feeling like worship felt so planned,
overproduced.
yep, and overproduced, and that even to the point of like all the singers were smiley faces no matter what the lyrics were.
Yep.
And it felt like somebody in the background's like, whatever you do, keep smiling. I'm like, and they're just like, yeah, he was murdered on a cross. I'm like, this seems like the wrong emotion for what's going
Yeah.
on. So I remember worshiping mostly with my eyes closed because I didn't want to judge them. And I just thought, I would still want to be here. That was not enough to leave the church. But it was something that I was just like, ugh, that was a little bit. And then they made different decisions, but still, I was like, it's still my church. I don't know. It still was my
Yeah.
church. I still call it my home church, even with all the stuff that went down
Still
with the
talks about it on every podcast.
That's right.
constant.
So
Somebody
very
tell him he
formative.
works at another church.
that's right. So I don't know. Outside of the funny part is, I probably would pick a church heavily based on my kids are older, so worship would be a big part of it. So I mean, unless that changed dramatically, that'd be a piece of it, and then the preaching. So unless those changed, I don't really know. I guess the other one that they say is important. If I felt like the pastor wasn't a good person, like if I felt like they're
does
not even
anybody go to
immoral,
church here?
but if they're a bad person, I'd be like, this is hard to, because I would just be rubbed by like everything they say. I'd be like, I don't really know how I
You'd
feel
be
about
looking
that.
for the meaning behind the meaning
Yeah,
of everything that they
that'd be
said.
tough.
Yeah, I can see that.
Right.
Yeah. I can't get past worship is probably, I don't want it to be as high on my list as it is.
Yeah.
And I think it is. Like if worship were terrible, if the preaching were amazing, I still would really struggle. It'd be difficult for me.
Right.
And it's funny because I don't think I would ever say like, it's the most important thing to me. Yet when I really sit with it, I'm like, I think it's the most important thing for me.
Yeah.
Because even if the pastor's not, or the preaching's not great, but still theologically all right, or even the preaching is fine or good and theologically I don't line up perfectly, I feel like I can forgive those things easier. If the worship's just terrible, I'm like, I don't want to sit through this. That would be really, really hard.
And that was part of the conversation that we had because Stephanie, like, hey, worship can't be a show. We did go on our days off. We visited another church. It was fine. But it's just different. And we came to the realization of, listen, no matter where we go, we have done this for so long that we're going to see things that the average person isn't going to see. We're not going to love everything.
Yeah, you're going to find issues, and there's going to be things you like. They're really, I think you'd be able to make most things work.
Yeah.
It's just finding that, like, it's what church really is. I'm not going just to hear good worship and to hear, it's like, I want to be involved with this body of believers because I think what God said, that the gates of hell will not prevail against you.
Yeah.
I think that's to the church. Like that's to this.
Yeah,
I want to be a part of a local body that is striving. We're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. I don't think we're driving hard enough towards certain things, but I'm like, we're trying really hard.
I think
like that.
one thing that we do really well, though, is when we make mistakes, we don't try to hide them. We don't try to cover them up.
Yeah.
We own our issues and move forward the best way that we can. I think, too, one of the things that resonated with me, and it kind of ties into everything that we're talking about, I had a lady call me, and she was talking about a church that she attended that I'm friends with the pastor. We're not super close, but friendly, at least friends with, but yeah, we're friends. And she was talking about the church, and she was like, I'm not getting anything out of the preaching. I was thinking about leaving. And so I asked her, I said, hey, is there anything wrong with the preaching? And she goes, no, nothing wrong with it at all. Everything that he's saying is right on. I'm just not really getting anything out of it. I said, how do you feel about the community? Because there's the community that you're a part of is huge. That's a massive part of church. Because even if the worship's terrible, that's 30 minutes a week. Even if the preaching's terrible, that's 45 minutes to 3 hours, depending upon who's preaching at this church a week.
Every other week.
Every other week. And so
Other week.
so
I'm with you on the community
the
part.
community part matters. Like it's the family part.
Yeah.
It was
the family
easy
aspect.
to leave Willow, even though I was taking a job, but I had no relationships there other than the basketball ministry, which I kept being a part of.
Yeah, you could still do that.
But outside of that, if you're not connected, if there's not some sort of a community of people there, it made it really easy. And that was my home church where I got baptized. You know what I mean? So I had this really deep connection to it. But I'm like, but I don't know anybody here.
I would struggle. It's funny that you say that because I'm like, I would actually struggle even if I'm, let's say I'm watching videos and listening to sermons online where I'm getting a bunch out of it. Because we joke about this all the time. You can listen to the best preachers in the world, like from the one click. So you can get fed somewhere. It would be tough though, because I would feel like I was connecting more with strangers online, listening to great sermons and getting good words and feeling the Spirit move and opening up the scriptures. And then I go to my church and it's like, if it just falls flat, it was sermons that I like have heard before or topics where it doesn't feel like the scripture's really being opened up. That would start to wear on me. I have to admit, like
Also, if my kids
be
didn't
tough.
like it, would get
no,
old.
that's
Right.
If my kids don't like it and they're not connecting, that would get old.
Yeah.
I'd just be like, you know what? Because I can make do, but I still don't. I would not go to a church where I'm like, I'm getting nothing from the worship, nothing from the sermons, but my kids like it. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So mom
I
and
have
dad
so
being
many
completely
friends that do
disconnected.
that. So many friends.
So
All
how am
of
I
them are
modeling
this
at
church.
home that I'm just like, yeah, I'm glad you like it, but I'm nice. I was like,
It just went under the radar.
yeah, it was good. I was like, how is that good for the family unit
Yeah.
if mom and dad are like, yeah, we're not bought in this church at all, but I'm glad it works for you guys.
You would. I think about this all the time. Like a bunch of my friends do that, and I go like, that's the sacrifice you make for your kids, man. If they're getting something and they're growing closer to the Lord, you feel like it's fine to sacrifice your spiritual health. I'm not saying that you're like, it's horrible for you, but you're not growing. I would sacrifice that for my boys. Like if I knew, I'd be like,
sure.
dude, it's gonna happen. Like I would do it. It's not smart. I'm not saying you should do it.
Yeah.
But I would, and it would probably be bad because now the one of the spiritual leaders in the home is kind of like not being fed, not growing, not leading. But at the same time, the alternative is going to a place where I'm fed and my kids hate it. Heck no.
Yeah, but
Like,
then
there's no way.
don't you feel like in that situation too, though, there's going to be a point where your kids age out of growth? Because if you're not connecting with the preaching, isn't there a likelihood that they're not going to connect either when they get to a certain age?
The other part
maybe.
is church the most important part of spiritual development for your kids? It's an important part, but is it the most
It
important part?
shouldn't be, but in a lot of families it is.
Yeah, this might be the only training they're getting.
What's funny is, even let's say it's not the most important, it's probably second.
Pretty
But they're
important.
also
It's way, even in a really healthy family.
It's got to be second.
We
It's number
sent our
two.
kids to Christian school because we did think it was important. So I mean, same idea.
Yeah,
like,
but
something
but it
outside
wasn't
the home.
really a Christian school.
Right.
Yours especially. Yeah,
I think
yours
We can't
they
all
will
go to
witness.
Fresno Christian.
That's right.
I think they will witness, at some point in their life, or realize that, mom and dad, they drove all the way out here to the so-and-so church because, my sister and I liked it, and that really meant a lot. They
Yeah.
sacrificed a lot.
And I tell
in
my
that-
kids every night on the way to bed, I pray for them every night, and then
Yeah.
I tell them like, just so you know, I'm making a lot of sacrifices for
Right.
you, and I need them to know
Yeah.
how important I am.
I think
in their
that
lives.
selflessness will speak to it in itself over time. I think the idea of that is you're still spiritually leading them. It's not just taking them to the right church and,
Yeah.
and you're in
Take me to
service.
church. Sorry, bad song.
And so
Just know that you're ruining this family, kids.
That's
it's
right.
just like, this is the idea of they'll take that'll last with them,
Yeah,
I think
hopefully.
about what my parents were taking me to church and And now the song's in my head. Every
know.
time I
Dude,
say it,
I didn't like that he
every-
said it. That time I was like, are you feeding it to?
Yeah.
I'm going to sing it.
when my
It's
parents
horrible.
used to
It's a
take me
horrible
to church.
song.
There it is. Yeah.
It's not a good song.
It's a great song.
Hosier, right?
Terrible.
Yeah. So anyway, it's just the idea of, even though you're saying there is that sacrifice and they may grow out of that, I think that the fact that you are selflessly sacrificing is still being a spiritual leader.
Yeah,
if that
you
makes
also
sense.
have to know that some of it is kids aren't going to like everything all the time.
Right.
You could be at an amazing church with a great youth group
Yeah.
and children's ministry.
Right.
Your kids still aren't going to like it.
Because you're trying to compete with the PS5 and all of the technology
Sure.
that they have. That's
Sure.
part. I mean, that's part of it, really.
Yeah.
Or
and
kids
the
could
other
be
part,
mean.
yeah, and life is.
know?
I remember I was at the biggest church in town with the greatest youth group and children's ministry ever. I mean, literally, it was the best, and I didn't want to go.
Yeah.
Like when I was young, my mom and dad would force me. If I didn't want to go to the group, I would have to sit with them in the sanctuary, and I would fall asleep on my mom's lap. And it's like those were actually good memories now because
are
I'm like,
great
I was with
memories,
my
man.
mom.
See, some of
At
my
the time, though, I'm miserable.
Yeah.
some of the challenges I saw, there's a couple of big churches in town have very good children's ministry and youth groups. But the person at the top, at part of the leadership, I'm like, I don't like the direction this is going.
Yeah, I'm
So
right
like-
here, by the way. So if you could
That's
tone
right.
that down a little bit.
So I was like, I'd be like, no. Like, I think that's another part of it that would speak into it for me is like, where's the church going? Who's speaking into this?
Yeah.
What's the leadership like? Because these other things can get better.
Sure.
You know, and I'd have at least confidence in who's leading it
Yeah.
versus being like, hey, it's good right now, but that person's speaking into this.
You know
So-
what a difference too is that I just realized. I think we all have the builder mindset. So if I went into a place and was like, "Hey, this church is really good. Youth group and let's say kids is not what I want it to be,"
I'm gonna get involved.
I'm volunteering. Like
Yeah.
I'm going to be like, "Dude, what can I do to make this awesome for my kid?" Because the better it is for my kid, better it is for
Better it
everybody.
is for everybody,
So
yeah.
I think I would try and move into that space and be like, "What can I help with?"
Yeah.
Let me just try and assist.
I think that any time too that you're surrounding yourself with a group of humans, right? And you're in a community, and this is something that we're looking at. Like this is something that we're trying to be conscious of for myself and Steph. It's probably going to get a little awkward, right? I step down from the position. We stay in the community. It's probably going to be a little weird.
I bet there'll be times for sure.
There'll be times it'll be a little weird. I think the nice thing for us is I feel like I'm still going to have a voice with you guys because again we're friends. Like I'm still
100%. Yeah.
And just because
I want to
don't-
work on certain ministries with you still.
yeah,
like,
for sure.
So yeah.
And just because I don't have a title isn't what makes you a leader. I'm going to be a leader no matter what. That's
Yeah.
just a part of who I am. Which sounds terrible to say about yourself, but it's true.
Yeah.
But how in a church, because even this situation aside, just normal everyday church goer, there will be times where it will get uncomfortable. It may get awkward. It may get weird. And I think part of it is anytime anything is not just unicorns and rainbows, man, we gotta go. We gotta go somewhere else where we're, it's
The
not
funny
always
thing
about
is-
being happy. Sometimes it's about being in a place where you can grow.
Yeah. And I don't think Ashley asked me the same thing. She was like, "Well, don't you think people are still going to go to him with questions and stuff?" And I said, "Yeah, and it'll be hilarious because he'll be like, I don't know, go talk to them."
Yeah.
That's literally
Right.
No, it'll be, I don't work here anymore.
Yeah. I actually don't think that would be awkward. I actually think you have even if it's like 10, because I think the first few weeks, and like if those people didn't show up to church to hear the announcement and stuff, they don't know, so they ask you, you would just be like, "Oh no, go talk to Josh about that. Go talk to Ryan and Joe." Like,
Yeah.
and just be like, that's it. And they're like,
Yeah.
"Well, wait a minute," and be like, "What? What do you want from me? I literally don't work here."
There's also another piece of this too, where the people who go to, I mean, literally, it'd be all mega churches if that's all people wanted, right? They're gonna have the best youth groups, they're gonna have the best children's ministry, top worship, all that stuff. But other churches exist for a reason.
yeah.
People want something that they feel like they can be a part of.
Well,
they
in fact,
can
the
speak into.
vast majority of churches.
Yeah, the
right?
fact that
Like,
anybody even
let's be
attends
honest.
a non-mega church means like it's okay if your youth group and your children's ministry isn't perfect.
Mega
'cause some
churches
people
are still
want
a
connection.
tiny percentage of the population of churches.
Yeah, sure.
I honestly think most people really want to be a part of a closer knit community that they can be a part of.
Yeah.
You can find that family type environment at a mega church. I've been to mega churches that, their thing were small groups and they're amazing at it. And so that's where people feel connected. It's awesome. So I don't have a problem, but it's clear we were made to be in community. There's no way around it. And so if your church is amazing, the preaching's incredible, the worship's great, and you're not plugged in, you will fade away. I don't care, big or small, doesn't matter. You
All
will
the way
fade away
back to
without
the
community.
beginning, man. In Genesis, God said it's not good for man to be alone.
Yeah.
You were not made to do this in isolation.
Well, and there's something about too, if you're going to a smaller church and you're like, I'm going to help on a work day, and you're like, your actual contribution
Yeah.
matters, your tithing matters, your
Right.
kids being in a youth group matters, like your family has massive kingdom impact
Yeah.
in a smaller church. So there is that, whether or not you leave a church, is that's going to play into it too. Like my family is connected here,
Yeah.
not just me.
So okay, so give me a quick little answer. What is a good reason for someone to leave their home church?
I think Joe. Actually,
Joe is a good reason. That was a good pause.
He gave a good reason. No, I was trying to say. Sorry, I'm so wiped
I
out.
liked it actually.
I think Joe. I think Joe hit it on the head when he said if there's an idea of, I feel like this is what's the term, disingenuine, or just it's.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You know, like this is
Yeah. Not authentic.
whether it be the worship or the message or the relational community portion. And I've had interactions with like that of that sort with previous churches I've visited and played worship for, and it just struck me as it could be theologically, skewed, even dangerous for ego, or it didn't feel as like an environment that I was going to grow in. It felt like more I was going to be unhealthy for me specifically. As for leaving, if let's say I found a home church and I'm there for a couple of years, to find a reason to leave, I don't know, man. It would have to be something substantially, like a pretty deep offense, or something that is logistical. Like, hey, I'm got a job, different area of the state, But otherwise, if a brother offends you, I'd take him in and talk to him.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
What do you got, Floyd?
I think you're right. I think the only thing, it would be like a major theological shift.
Yeah.
Because they started to say, is there a time where you could outgrow your community? But I feel like if you do, then you have an obligation to grow the people around you.
I agree.
Step into
I
leadership.
think
That's
that
good.
our a lot of times in churches, we're trying to appeal to the least common denominator, right? And I don't think that that's necessarily our job. I think our job is to raise that. I think that our job is to raise the bar and call people to higher levels. And so if you find yourself in a place that you've outgrown your community, then you do need to start a new community within your body. You start a small group.
Right.
You start Bible studies.
Right.
You offer your services to
initiative.
the pastor.
right.
You get on the board. you do these things.
Otherwise, you
I
become
like
a
that.
consumer. Right?
Yeah,
You're just like, I'm
right.
moving somewhere else to consume more for me.
And
Well, I
let's be
think maybe
honest,
that's part of the problem too, right? Is the consumer Christianity culture that we live in right now is just it's disgusting.
Yeah.
I think a lot of moves, and again, this is from a
super aggressive.
and I realize too, I don't have kids. I'm not married yet, so those priorities will change.
you know of.
Those
Well, you know
priorities
of.
and that perspective will change. I know for a fact.
Yeah, it does.
So
it does.
and also because I serve here, so it's like from the perspective of if I was attending a church and not serving at it. But having said that, it is. I can't imagine not attending somewhere and serving and not finding community and trying to sharpen each other. The idea of outgrowing community, again, it would feel like if the Spirit is calling me, if God is calling me in another direction, then it's a season. It's not outgrowing them. It's like, okay, I'm equipped for this next season.
Yeah, you being called out is a little different.
That's all I can fathom right now.
What do you got?
Mine's probably moral, a shift in leadership where they're going in a direction I didn't sign up for when I got there. So all of a sudden things are going in a different direction. I could see that where you're like,
Sure.
Although Willow changed leadership a ton of times and I didn't, but their still mission was still the same. But so it doesn't just have to be a change of leadership, just a shift in direction. Like we're doing something else. I'm like, okay, that might do
Oh,
it.
are you saying working at a church or
Nope,
attending?
just
Oh,
attending.
attending.
And then kindness. If I felt like all of a sudden it got mean spirited, I couldn't be there. So it doesn't have to be moral. It could just be it's just mean spirited. I'm like, nah, no thanks.
I think number two probably is worship, which is interesting to think about. But I think number one almost all boils down to like a theological or doctrinal error that I think is so massive. So that would be the if they changed philosophies.
Yeah.
If I agreed, if it was theologically sound and even if it was like, well, I don't want to do, but I can see the validity in that. I think that would even be okay, and I'd probably stay for that. It's if it was like, you're preaching hardcore lose your salvation or something like that, where I'm like, I just can't get on
or
board.
prosperity doctrine.
Dude, prosperity doctrine, I wouldn't be there in the first place. Like I'm telling you right now,
hardcore fundamentalist.
right. There's a fundy side of it where I'm just like, I just can't be a part because everything flows out of that. Your view of God,
Yes.
everything you think and do flows out of that, whether you think it does or not. So I'm like, if it was whatever that is, if it was just so off doctrinally from what I believe, I think I just couldn't
think
do
the
it.
other big one would be is that if they didn't value honesty, meaning like if I couldn't be like, hey, have you thought about this? Like, no, we don't think about that. This is what we believe.
Yeah.
That'd be another
Yeah,
one. I'd be
yeah.
like, I'm out.
Oh
of
yeah,
here.
if the door isn't open for
I can't
for
even
conversation.
talk to you about this stuff.
We've had a
Like,
lot
even-
of people come to us and say like, all I did was ask this question, and I don't know the full story.
yeah.
But we have so many people say like, I tried to ask a question about this, and they literally kicked me out of the church, and I'm like, that's brutal. That's the kind of stuff where I'm like,
I just talked
can't.
with someone recently, and they said that their parents and the church would always get upset because they'd always question everything. And I'm like, I can understand that, like questioning authority or not landing the plane, right? Not agreeing, finding something that you agree with or have absorbed, but instead, I'm like, that otherwise. Yeah, question.
It would
you're
get
designed
old.
that way.
It would get old if somebody did that all the time.
Well,
but I'm still like,
if they're a cynic.
well, no,
or-
but
or
I would
still hyper skeptical.
I'd still be okay with that because I think it's one of those things. Like, well, what did you mean by that? And I know you said this, but like, could it be the opposite? And I'd be
Right.
like, wait, I will think through every one of those.
Well,
That's
we're
fine.
we have the conversations.
Yeah.
So going back
absolutely.
full circle to like if I felt like you said something that offended me,
Yeah.
and I sat down and talked with you, you would talk with me,
Right.
And you're like, you know what, you're right. I messed up. I apologize to different people, and I'll apologize to you. If I felt like that happened, I'd be like, oh, I could stay here forever.
That's what I think.
I would
too.
be like,
Yeah.
that's all I want.
Well, that's a
I don't-
healthy family dynamic.
I'm not looking for perfection. Even if you brought up something theologically different than I did, you're like, well, here's where I landed. I said, well, have you
Yes.
thought about this? Yeah. And like, you know what? We're just seeing this differently, but I felt heard.
Exactly.
I'm like, I can live with that
Yeah.
as well.
If you could defend that position, I'm way more. Even if I, again, at the end disagree with it, I go.
And it depends on how big a topic
But
we're
we've
talking
thought
about.
through it. Yeah, exactly.
Like,
I don't know if you guys heard this. It was really subtle, but I don't think Josh is having kids until we do the remodel of the children's area. So we probably should hurry up.
Yeah.
He's not wrong.
That's all he's waiting
Having
on.
more.
Get
kids.
on it.
That's good.
Okay, I like that. I think that's interesting.
Let's go to a winger.
Sure.
I
ones on the
put
list
the
here?
first I put the first one on there. I
Yeah.
thought this was interesting. It was a Mike Winger question. It's what exactly is sin?
It's missing the mark. What's
Missing
the next
mark.
question?
Done.
But like missing what mark and what
Any mark.
specifically what
All
does
the
it
marks.
mean?
Like all the
Yeah,
marks.
any-
Like the mark, like from the Bible.
Like Mark
you don't-
Twain?
you don't get him.
Mark
It's like,
Twain.
nope.
Mark the God.
You know
Yeah.
what Mark said? I don't
Mark
get it.
Gossenberger.
You're out.
No,
It's
Mark.
sin.
Yeah.
Mark Gossenberger.
Yeah.
Do we have a mark?
Ryan Goslinger. I
There
don't know
it
what
is.
it was. I don't know what's going.
What exactly is sin? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I've got lots of thoughts. What do you guys think?
I think it is simply that. I think it's missing the mark. I think it's.
But like explain that.
Well, I was
So
trying.
if someone
Okay,
does
go.
not know the Lord or doesn't know the Bible, how would you explain sin?
So I think I would say I think it's missing the mark, and I would say I
Nope,
don't
leave it at that again.
I don't think we have the ability to hit the mark on our own.
Okay, but you got to like what is
So
you got to define that.
it's anywhere that I fall short of God's best for me, and I think that happens very often, and that's why I'm glad it's not up to me for my salvation. My salvation is
Wait a
found
minute.
in Him.
Anywhere. Sorry, let me just think through this. Anywhere that you're not hitting God's best for your life. Is that what you said? Mm-hmm. Is it possible to ever do that on your own?
That's what I'm saying. Our righteousness is as filthy rags. So our goal is to attempt to live up to that which we've already attained, right? So we're trying to live a life. We're trying to live life in such a way that it honors the death and resurrection of Christ. But in and of ourselves on earth, I don't know that we ever have the ability to do that, but we should continue to strive. I don't think that we ever reach a point of perfection,
Yeah.
right?
So
Josh?
that's for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. There's
And
no.
I was on you the whole time.
Well, I was talking, guys. That was me.
Josh, what do you got?
For me, it's thought, word, and deed, and any rebellion against God's law.
Okay, so God's law.
Thought, word, indeed.
So
any
the God's
from my
law is
Lutheran upbringing.
God's law is
No.
God's law is the
Commandments.
mark then.
The
That's
10
pretty
Commandments?
solid.
Are we talking about the 10 Commandments? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. How would you define God's law?
Sure, I'd say the Ten Commandments.
We're talking about
I would
Pharisaical.
read them. I would read them the scriptures though that back those up. I wouldn't just list out the Ten Commandments though. because it's not like it's in the Bible saying here's the 10 Commandments.
Wait, are you saying that
like a
the Ten
list?
Commandments don't stand by their? I'm just.
No,
being-
they do. I'm just saying
I'm
it's
just-
like
I'm just being that guy today.
we
So
I
it
chose
boils
trying
down
to-
to God's law.
yeah, and,
Both
and-
moral. It's kind of the whole law, right?
right,
Moral
and
law.
it's not just the action, but and again, Lutheran upbringing, thought, word, and deed.
Yeah.
All right.
That's not bad.
I think one of the things that complicates, I like the God's law because you're trying to figure out what the mark is.
I do too. I like that.
So God's basically, you're trying to figure out where's your moral compass. So as Christians, God's setting that. He's saying, here's what sin is. Here's when you're doing wrong. I think the complicated part is that the Bible says anyone then who knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it sins.
Right.
So I think then that expands even a little bit.
Absolutely,
to,
it does.
Like it just beyond that, your soul or your conscience telling you this is the good thing, and then you don't do it.
Yeah.
Also, it's kind of like you can make something sin, which is weird.
Yeah.
Sure,
Well,
yes.
we often think of sin as something you do that's wrong.
Right.
That kind of flips it a little bit and says like no, it's the things that you're not doing
don't
that are
do.
right.
Done and left undone.
That's an interesting. It does just expand it a little bit more.
It opens it up, but it is still based in God's word and God's law. So I think it goes down to Jesus saying, I didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, because the law tells you you're a sinner. So if you're trying to figure out, do I sin? The law is the place that you would immediately look to and say, am I fulfilling this? Am I keeping what the law says?
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and by the way, the law obviously goes from moral to thought to kindness, to anything, because Jesus talks about lusting, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
so from anything you could think of. So I think that's the mark,
Paying your taxes.
right. And missing that,
Render unto Caesar's what
Watch
is
it.
Caesar's.
That just
Watch
feels
it.
Just
hard.
saying.
it's the bad you can do and the good you don't do.
Yeah, agree.
So
I,
I think it's both.
think my aversion to what Josh said is because, and I don't disagree with you,
Sure.
but I think my initial reaction was like, ugh, because I grew up super.
I'd rather take
fundamental,
disagreement, by the way.
like super
As opposed to
funny.
disgust.
And so that feels very Pharisaical to me. Like being bound to the law feels very Pharisaical to me, and I was that guy. And so I think that for me, that there's that little twinge of,
Oh, you think it? You're interpreting it as being bound to the law.
yeah, and I like what Joe said too, and what Jesus said that Joe quoted.
But he wasn't.
right.
I don't think it's being
Jesus
bound.
didn't.
I
come-
told him.
I can understand that being bound to the law, but he was asking, how would you define sin? He wasn't asking like, how do you define sin and salvation and
Sure.
how you should live your life.
And that's why I'm trying to clarify, like, what are we calling God's law? Because if we just refer to the Ten Commandments, yeah, I mean, everything is really covered there when you get down to the
Right.
bases.
And that's
right?
why
But
I
there
said
are
that,
so
because
many
that
things
was
in
when you're
worlds.
saying the bad I do and the good I don't do. I'm like, how do I measure this bad and good? And that's why the only thing I know is
And the law, the Ten Commandments aren't only the law. The law is way more than that.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
massive. And then go into the New Testament where he just lays out like, here's some sin. Paul will just lay it out. These are like, these 7 things are sin: greed, idolatry,
I think it's interesting
selfish ambition.
Yeah.
because
pride.
those actually, what's funny is that list is covered in the Ten Commandments. The law that the Hebrew nation stood on was beyond the Ten Commandments, and it is not really in the Bible, if we're honest.
Well, the
It's- they wrote-
621 come from the Talmud. They're mixed with
Right.
the Talmud. That's
Right.
That's the challenge.
But they're
they got-
not the direct Ten Commandments. I think they are guidelines that God gave for his people. And I actually think most of them were bound for his people then, being
You're talking about Leviticus and
being an
Deuteronomy.
ancient
Right.
Near East tribe, trying to. I think God was trying to draw out his people. This is. I don't think it's controversial, but it's a little deeper. It's more than I think most people
it's
would.
a
It's
mix
fascinating.
because you have what is Levitical law versus the moral law. So the stuff in
Right.
Leviticus and in Deuteronomy that are still moral law are
Yeah.
for always, all time. So, and you are parsing those. You are
Absolutely.
You are actually literally even Jesus kind of releasing Peter from the diuretic, the dietary
Yeah.
requirements.
Which is why the Ten Commandments actually hold more true, because even the law, like the Levitical law or the Mosaic law, there's a bunch of laws that are just expand on the Ten Commandments. They go into detail of what the Ten Commandments are saying,
Right.
and you can actually fit those in really easily. Like,
Right.
do not murder is do not murder, and they kind of break it down. So you're like, there's more, and it's like, yeah, but it pretty much falls in this category.
Which is interesting because then Jesus equates hate with murder. So that's the
Exactly.
expansion of it.
Murder of the
Saying
mind.
it's in your heart.
Yeah,
you
in
know
your
what I
heart.
mean? Like
Thank you.
raka.
Yeah.
If you say you
Yeah.
fool,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
guilty of murder. So that's kind of the expansion of it, where it's like, if you go down to just like, here's the don't do's,
Yeah.
right? And then there's kind of this idea where Jesus is like, well, it's about your heart. So that's what's
Absolutely.
complicated
Well, then
about
there's-
sin.
It's taking care of the widow and the orphan. There's more
Right,
of the
right.
do.
There's
part
blasphemy
that-
of the spirit. It isn't mentioned necessarily specifically in that sense in the Ten
in the
Commandments.
Ten Commandments, right. And how
you shall
I
honor
mean,
the Lord your God.
Right.
That-
Yeah, sure. I guess that's
honestly,
kinda
they
does,
should put
yeah.
no other God before you. Like there is.
yeah, that is yeah, that's true.
And I think for me, a lot of it is you have to be very honest with yourself. Like you have to be super honest. You have to be pretty in tune. But I think that for me, it's not about necessarily following a document. It's about being sensitive to the Holy Spirit and
sure.
His
Yeah.
conviction.
No, that's very good.
When
but
I'm,
but like he
because
said,
that covers both the things that
even-
I do and the things that I don't.
That's
do.
right. And I guess, but even the Holy Spirit, like one of the ways you hear the Holy Spirit is kind of God's word. It kind of helps you.
Absolutely.
It's weird because you've been trained in it, right? And so intuitively. But I would say, before I became a Christian, I knew right from wrong. God's truth
Yeah.
was in me. Like
God-
it wasn't
God
like
made
I
that
was
pretty
like
we have a conscience.
I wasn't like, oh, what I did was I had guilt and shame.
What's
over
tough
things
though
I
is
did.
that would be so the not that it's an argument against that. I completely agree with you. A portion of that has to be that you were raised in a Judeo-Christian society, and so that's
it's
already
subjective?
kind of built in. Well, that's interesting, and I think we'll talk about that in a
Well,
sec.
that
Okay.
goes back to the idea that people be held accountable to what they know.
Exactly.
Sure.
So when it comes to sin specifically,
Right. Because that ends up being is that's where I think that anyone then who knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it sins. It goes back to this idea that you've set laws amongst you, even if you didn't know the Lord.
Right.
You've said this is good or bad, and breaking that in that even if it's set in a cultural context, God would connote that as sin, right? That would say, yeah, you're sinning in that sense because you've determined this is wrong, and
Right.
yet you still did it.
Yeah.
So even then, you're bound by this idea that you've sinned. So it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah. Why that question? I'm really curious.
Well, that was a Mike Winger question, and
Oh,
so I
okay.
actually loved it. And I'm drawn to that because I have for years, Ashley and I have had this discussion.
sinner.
Well, just for a couple years. We have an interesting theory. This is not. I'm not going to preach this. This is just something that we've been talking
gonna
about
share it on
for
a podcast.
years,
on,
right?
on the internet.
Well, I'm not saying it like this is what we've landed on. It's just been a discussion in our home for years. Is that sin seems to boil down to consequences for God, and it not towards God, but when God looks at us and says, "This is what I want of you, and these are my laws." They're not laws that he's just arbitrarily writing down and saying, "If you break that, I'm going to be mad." He writes it and says, "I built the earth this way, and I've given you laws for your good. If you break them, I'm not mad.
you deserve death.
I'm not mad and like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that." He just goes, "Dang it, there's a better way for you because of the consequences that you will now face based on those sins."
How does that work with eternal consequences? Like, I get it as a believer,
Right.
right? That makes sense to me as
Yeah.
a believer. But as a non-believer, and God saying, "I'm going to be held accountable to Him specifically."
You absolutely are.
Where,
Because
like,
the consequence of that, the consequences of sin, the wages of sin is death without Jesus.
Which is interesting because if you look at it like that, before the law, the fall already causes me to be born into sin, right?
Right.
And then
Absolutely.
and the reality here's what I think is fascinating. Like when people talk about sin, I'm always like, I've never met a non-believer in my life, atheist or not, that's not like, oh yeah, no, there's sin. That we make mistakes. Like we do things that are wrong.
But they may say there's evil.
Every single person would say, I've done something wrong,
Yeah.
right? Like bad. And even in wherever they're saying it's, whether it's because it's the law or the community
Yeah.
or their spouse or their kids or life. So I always think it's fascinating is we're trying to, because what ends up happening is nobody's trying to say they're not sinning. They're trying to figure out, is this sin? Like, because a lot of times the church is saying this is sin. And then they're saying, according to who?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
why are you the ones that get to say what is right or wrong in our world? On
And
many
I
levels.
think, and I honestly think that without a bunch of guidance, we can still land on what is sin. I think without somebody else telling us, because, and this is where the consequences come in, because with enough time, you can try out life and you can find the spots where there are consequences in your life, and those are sin.
Yeah.
And that's what's super interesting because you would land, I would bet money that if you lived long enough and you tried it all, you would say, these are the things that had consequences that hurt me. Those would all be the sins. These are the things that had positive impact on my life. Those are the righteous things. God set this world up. I think God is so present in what we do as far as how he set up the entire thing.
Sure. Yeah.
If I offend you, if I hurt my brother, that is a sin. I will know because of the consequence of that. In the Old Testament, we have the 3 types of laws, right? It's moral, civil, and
look.
ceremonial.
Yeah, those 3. I'm gonna go find them real fast.
Okay, go check that out.
This guy.
Moral, it's unbelievable. Moral, civil, and ceremonial. And moral is the one that lasts for all time. Civil is the one that lasts in certain cultures at certain times. And ceremonial was strictly for the Hebrews in that time.
Event-based stuff.
So I would say that, like, what was a sin, and this is a question that I wanted to ask you guys too as a follow-up, what I see as sin for them back then was God again saying, hey, that's because right now there are consequences in those ceremonial laws or even in the civil laws where he says later they won't have those consequences. You won't have those consequences. Right now it is a sin to eat animals with forked hooves, with split hooves, and to eat certain shellfish. There were legit consequences for them. That's why he was steering them away from that. It wasn't for any, he didn't hate hoofed animals. He didn't hate crawfish.
Yeah.
He was looking out for he was looking out for his people.
Yeah. Right.
That's literally why he taught them the ceremonial law of teaching them to wash their hands, where he said, look, if you touched a dead body, kill that cow, take the ash and the fat. Literally taught them to make soap in the Old Testament long before we had any clue of bacteria.
Yeah.
That's one of the most astounding concepts I've ever heard in my life.
A question for you. As you were saying that,
For Joe.
anything that has, for Joe, this will be the best answer he's given. Everything that has consequences is a sin, is what you're saying, right?
I would expand a little, but basically, I think.
So,
and obviously, the negative consequences, there are positive consequences.
Sure.
So my brain immediately goes to like trying.
I couldn't find them.
My 8 is rising up.
No,
today.
no, I like this because Ash and I do this a lot because we're like, poke holes in this. That's the only reason.
Poor financial management, not misappropriation, not misuse. That does have consequences. That does have earthly consequences. It doesn't have eternal consequences.
Yeah.
But how? I mean, I guess you could draw a line between that and sin.
Yeah, no, that's what's weird.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying
Not making enough money. How about that? You didn't.
no, but managing what you do
Managing what you do
correctly,
Yeah.
and mismanaging what you do. And here's the crazy part.
Right.
I would actually say mismanaging your that would kind of fall into that. And it's weird because I'm like, that'd be a minor sin. And again, once you're saved, those consequences are not eternal.
Yeah,
they are not
yeah.
sending you to hell.
Right.
Right.
So I want to make that distinction because I think there are, and even the massive ones, right? So as minor as it can be to the massive, you can murder somebody and face consequences. You can mismanage some of your funds and lose some money. And not saying that God even looks at those as the same. He just looks at them as consequences. Like that's rough. You've made your life so much more difficult because you have to spend time in prison now because of that.
Sure.
Or you've hurt your family a little bit and your lifestyle is going to be a little different than I think he wants for us.
Yeah.
Consequences.
Placing your treasures in the wrong
And
places.
so those
You can place
things.
your treasures. It could be an emotional
Which
thing.
are the
Did you get back?
consequences that become eternal? Oh, I couldn't find those 3 sins. Oh,
Yeah.
I was looking.
It's moral, civil, and ceremonial. We got it.
Thank you.
We found
I read
it.
it.
Right when
Mosaic.
you left, we found them in
the
your seat.
Mosaic law.
I want to ask this one. I want to also ask a question about kind of the idea of why the Jews and why Jesus can claim that they actually know what sin is and can define it, because I think that's interesting.
Could?
Yeah.
Why Jesus and the Jews
Right.
could claim
define
it.
sin
Well, we
to
kind
the
of know
world.
why Jesus could.
then-
Yeah, Jesus.
But I guess the one I was thinking of is like, what is the part that makes it? Because you said God's not mad at us, and I agree with that, except for the idea that Jesus' resurrection and payment on the cross basically demolishes the enmity between God and man. So like we were God's enemies.
So
and
like so propitiation is what that is. That's to appease the wrath of. So it says
That's
that
right.
Jesus is the
Right.
propitiation of God's wrath.
Right.
God had wrath against us.
That makes me just think that those consequences isn't just, and you might not be saying this, I don't think they're just earthly. There's something about who God is.
So they're not just earthly. You're right.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the consequences of sin is enraging God when it comes to you're missing the mark. And again, to clarify this. It's goofy. It's not. I don't think it's super clean.
I'm not even saying I know what I'm talking about. I'm just asking questions.
But that is the consequence. That is one of the consequences of sin. Is that it enrages God, not in the wrath that we have. We think of wrath in us as this, like, oh my gosh, he's so angry. I'm so mad at you.
Like
I'm
a
going to
rageful
smite
father.
you.
Yeah.
I think with God, it's I'm heartbroken because I have to give you the wages that you've earned. I don't he doesn't want that for us. It says it's his will that none shall perish.
Do you think that God, I don't know that God's rage ever turns to us. I think it turns to the sin nature, right?
Unless you lived in Noah's day.
Or just think about people that aren't people aren't Christians right now, right?
Yeah.
So people who are saying like they haven't received Jesus as their Savior, their sins aren't paid for. What is God's position towards them right now? Like, how does he?
This sounds bad, but you are getting the wages of what you wanted. So if you've never heard Jesus' name and you were never presented with that, it's a whole different ballgame. I don't think just because you have sin in your life, because you missed the mark, because you're facing consequences.
Because God is just.
Because I think God is absolutely
There has to be culpability.
I would
Absolutely.
actually say you're receiving the punishment of Adam. Because that's where the fall happened. That's where the break in the relationship, and you've inherited that into your life, right? And so I think that there's more on, like, it's basically, because that way it's not like someone was born, it's like, oh, I'm living my life not the way God wants, and God's mad. I'm like, no, there is a break called a fall, where our dynamic with God is when you are born is we are not in right relationship with him at birth.
Yes.
Jesus comes to restore the break.
But without knowledge at all, you're judged according to that. And I think I think God's grace abounds massively.
Yeah, it's not knowledge of Jesus, but it's still that conscience that we're given.
Sure.
That knowledge of good and bad.
Absolutely. We all know by nature. I mean, Scripture talks about. So and I'm like, and so there is something to that. That's why, and luckily, none of us are the judge, so I don't have to look at individual cases and even try and guess.
Yeah.
But I just, and I'm sure, we've thought about this for years. There's probably a million things we haven't thought of when it comes to consequences. But it seems like when I read Scripture, most of the things that grieve God are the consequences. It's because he loves us so much as his kids. It breaks his heart to see us not attaining which we've already received. He's calling us to so much more. He literally says, be perfect for I am perfect. Yeah. Not because he gets to sit back and be like, oh, I'm happy that they're doing what I wanted. He just wants the best for us. So when we don't get that, he's like, dang it, I wish they could see it more fully.
But someone would say, but then that sends me to hell. So God's so sad for me that I'm going to suffer eternally because he's so sad because I messed up and I didn't get his best.
Yeah,
That's why I think it goes back. That's why I think it goes back to Adam, because I agree with you.
Biblically, it clearly does.
I agree with God's heart being broken as now we're growing and doing things, because I think that is like, I don't think the idea of, I do agree with you, the idea of like sin in itself is definitely designed. God's not trying to trick you. He's giving you the law to live your best life. Yeah. The law is there to bless you, not to it condemns you. It says Moses' law condemns us.
The law is the revealer of sin.
That's right.
It
gives you boundaries.
And it's really meant to help you, even though it has a job, but it's meant to help you. And so that's what I was thinking, like, I do agree with this idea of, as it's written, it is breaking God's heart because he wants best for us. But I think the idea of original sin is what kind of is this idea of God's like, yeah, my heart's broken for you, but also there's something that you just inherited and every single person has, and I've made a way to restore that.
Yes.
And I'm trying to bring you to a place to restore what was lost.
And that's why I don't think that, like a lot of people will argue, I don't think God sends anyone to hell.
Could not agree more.
I don't think he does, man. I think he says, I am desperately trying to draw you unto myself the whole time. If you are constantly pushing me away, I've given free will out of love. I can't force you into anything. So when you have this decision, and I don't know at what point in life, I don't know how long you get that decision, but you get it for a long time, in my opinion. And then God says, like, hey, do you want this? And you go, no, I want nothing to do with you.
Live separate from you.
God goes, well, dang it.
Well,
what am I supposed to do?
It's like saying that the map took you to the wrong destination. You made choices along the route that led you to where you ended up.
And it's heartbreaking when you think about what those consequences actually look like, which is why I think there's more grace in God.
I think it goes back to this dynamic where you can look around nature and see that there's God. God's placed eternity in your hearts. Yeah. Where God's not even where some people are like, well, God's judging me for not knowing him. And I say, no,
I don't think he is.
God's
Yeah.
built into nature
Yes.
itself himself.
Yep.
And that you can find him. Everybody can find
Yes.
him.
Yep.
That he's saying, can be found.
We're spiritual beings.
Even more so today than ever before.
Yeah.
Like you can find him.
We're spiritual beings. We worship something. We have faith in something or someone in this world, or in God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those things.
Well, that's the judge by what you know. Like if someone's looking around and like there is a God and they're seeking him out, this is where things get complicated. Where I'm like, somebody asked me the gospel, it's John 14:6. It's Romans 10:9 and 10. It's John 3:16.
Right.
It's all those things.
Right.
But I do think it's fascinating that people will look around and seek after God. And I don't know if they'll learn the name of Jesus, what happens with them. But that's
100%.
because I do think that's the part God's like, seek me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can.
There are two atheists right now that I listen to a ton that both began their lives as Christians, raised Christian, fell away, and now are very outspoken atheists. They're the two that I think are still genuinely seeking. One of them actually talks about seeking all the time. The other one, I don't think he's actively seeking, but I think he's open. He just wants evidence that I don't think exists. He wants proof.
Sure.
But I laugh all the time because people get kind of mad at them. And I always think, this guy's on a great journey, and I'm pretty confident he's going to get saved.
Yeah.
And if he's not already, because I think he's on his way, he talks about all the time that he's praying. He prays a lot. And I'm like, God will answer.
That young, I think he's young, the English guy.
Sam Harris.
Harris. Yeah.
Sam Harris. Dude,
Brilliant and definitely on a journey of faith, whether he wants to admit it or not.
he's not mean-spirited. He's
No.
not angry. He says, I've tried, I've prayed, I've heard nothing. And I'm like, man, I think that guy is probably going to have an amazing, and it might be on his deathbed.
Did you
I don't
see
know.
the Jordan Peterson and him? That was so good, man. So
This is
good.
an important part about Jesus, where someone would say is like, hey, I really like chocolate. I want to enjoy it, but I don't know if God is good. And I'm like, wait, that doesn't make sense to me. The whole idea is you can see Jesus. You can literally read about Jesus. You can connect with him and say, Jesus is good. This is where Gandhi got. He's like, well,
Yeah.
I like this Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus, there's something good about him. And
I used his quote in my sermon a couple weeks ago.
Did you?
Just the second half of it. It's the Christians I don't like.
I love your Christ. I think he
Christ,
says.
but not the
your
Christians.
I love your Christ, but not the Christians.
Yeah.
Your Christians don't look anything like your Christ. And I'm
Yeah.
like, whoa,
Yeah.
that's a punch in the gut.
And that's
Right,
kind of
right.
that dynamic where I think it's hard for people, but I think it's good. I think there's something you should say is like, listen, you got Israel, God speaks to them, miracles, all this stuff. They get the law, all these great things. And it works for Israel. It works for some people in the world. There are the Judaizers, there are the God-fearers people, some people convert. But then God's like, that's not enough. I'm going to send Jesus. I think when you're looking for God, it feels like a theist perspective to look at all the different religions. But I think if you're looking for God, I think your best theist perspective is look at Jesus. And then through that lens, start trying to deal with the problem of evil and start trying to deal with, what is sin, who makes the rules, all that stuff. Because I think Jesus is your best image of what God is like.
Yeah.
And starting there, I think helps that dynamic. You say, no, I enjoy this thing without knowing all the other answers, but I still get it. I like chocolate, even though I don't know if God is good.
Yeah.
I like this Jesus. There's something about him, but I don't have all the other answers either.
I think the single most important question in the world is what to do with Jesus. I really do. If we're talking about existence in general and you're trying to figure things out, the first thing you have to do is answer the question of who is Jesus. Right. He was too important of a historical figure. Forget about everything else.
Yeah.
We based all of time on this guy's life.
Right.
And you can say, well, that's because they didn't know anything. They were fooled, whatever. You still got to go, well, he made a big enough impact. And I think you should do that, truthfully, with all the prophets. I think you should do that
Yes.
with all, because if you sit down and really, all the prophets that claim to have deity,
There's a lot.
look at them, check them out, because even the one, there's half a dozen prophets that say that their followers will say that they died and rose again and were resurrected. And I'm like, cool, find evidence.
Even some during the same time of Jesus.
100%.
Yeah.
I'm totally cool with that. Like, look for the evidence, because honestly, if you sit down for long enough, you're going to find that nobody's got
It
evidence.
is such a rabbit hole.
And Jesus is.
Oh my gosh.
It's too much. It's too much evidence to where I'm like, guys,
Yeah.
I don't know what you're supposed to do with this.
I've had this funny thought. We were talking about the bad that has been done and the good that's left undone. And then I think about like this idea of those who won't know of Jesus' name. And there's the golden rule that God says to love him with heart, soul, mind, and strength. And to love others as yourself.
Love all circle.
And then John, it says that they will know your disciples through your love. You know that you're disciples of Christ through your love. So I think part of the responsibility is on those who choose to deny, theism, but if they're surrounded by people who consistently love them, and not just to convert them, but just love them genuinely in whatever you feel called to, I think that's part of our responsibility too, not just to evangelize, but to truly build and seek relationships with the people in our community who are close to us, whatever they believe or not. And then through your love, they'll go, hey, like, why are you so, why did you forgive me in that situation? Or why were you so kind to that person when you shouldn't have been?
Yeah.
That's
I like that.
That's like Jesus, what he says, like, listen, when I was hungry, you didn't feed me. When I was naked, you didn't clothe me. When I was in prison, you didn't visit me. That's the good left undone that he's talking about.
Yeah.
That it plays.
Is that a sin if we don't
I think
love?
I think that's what he says.
I think it is what he's saying. He's
that's
separating the
exactly
sheep
what
from the
he's saying.
goats. I think he is saying, he's like, this is the sin that was still present in your life. It was the
Depart
good
from
left
me,
undone.
I never knew you was the like, you're,
I'd be
you're not, yeah.
I'd be scared to see what that list would look like today.
Terrifying.
Like, what is he saying? Like, you're not doing this.
Terrifying.
So, like, you're like,
Yeah.
oh,
You're not responding to those comments that you really wanted to.
Well,
right.
I think that's
Deleting
one of the most difficult things is because of media right now, we find out about every disaster the world has. And there's people hurting all over the world. What am I supposed to, how much can I do? Because the good left undone, we leave so much on the table every day. If any of us have a savings account, we've got money that could be spent on someone else, right?
Yeah.
So you that tempering that and being like, that's where you were saying earlier, like following the Spirit is key. Because I can't save the world. I can't put money towards every single disaster. So you got to go, God, what is it that you want me to do? And then have the fortitude to actually follow through and obey that. It's tough.
Well, that's good.
I think that's why the question, what's my role in this, is so important. And that's something that I've learned here. I can't fix every issue, but I may have a role to play. My role may simply be step back, pray,
Right.
and because it may be somebody else's role to actually intervene.
Yeah.
It may be my role to give money. It may be my role to step in between, step up.
That spirit-led part really does play into the idea of sin, which is interesting because Jesus could have healed everybody, but he didn't.
Oh, exactly.
He could have fed
Right.
everybody, but he didn't.
Right.
And so now it's going back down
I mean,
to
he fed a lot.
he did at least
Thousands.
5,000 and 4,000
Yes.
men and women, children. But it goes back to this idea that I think is very interesting is that it goes back to this idea. If you're trying to figure out what sin is or when I'm sinning, it really does go back into the idea of the paraclete, the advocate, the Holy Spirit leading you. Because in one moment, you not feeding someone, fine, actually. God's like, hey, don't.
Right.
And in another moment, God's like, hey, you're missing this opportunity right now. You're resisting me. I'm telling you this good to do, and you're saying no. And I think that's a fascinating dynamic, which I also do think it really smacks against the idea of judgment of others. Why Jesus talks about the idea of judgment, because you don't know what God is doing in someone's heart or life in that moment.
Right.
And so for you to judge someone based on their actions, you don't know what's happening.
It might be. So I want to ask one quick follow up, and then we got to do a would you rather to end. Maybe we'll see. Do you believe in the saying? I grew up with this saying. What's sin for one man may not be a sin for another type of a concept. Do you believe that can be true? Do you
Paul
believe
says the version of that.
Okay.
100%.
So we totally agree with that because that's a weird. If you think
Paul's
about
example
how weird
of the not eating
of sacrificing meat, sacrificing
So
animals.
work out with your own salvation with fear and trembling.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are trying to work out their own salvation without fear and trembling, and that's where we run into trouble.
Oh, it's interesting. They're going to say, I think people are trying to work out your salvation with fear and trembling.
I've had
A lot
that
of
happen.
people are.
They're trying
I
to-
just think that's the weirdest. It's honestly a weird concept of the like, hey, like this is such a sin for me, and you're doing it. So like it's obviously a sin for you, and it's like it's not. I prayed and it's fine. Like
This may be a thing.
This is why when the
well,
That
Yeah, for
specific
some people.
blend.
this
This
is
undercrown.
this is holy and righteous
yeah,
unto
that's
the
right,
Lord.
burnt
what
offering.
heaven's going to smell
This
like.
is what's interesting about Jesus coming in, and everybody follows the law, right? All the Pharisees are saying like it's very meticulously doing it well, and Jesus goes, "Oh, wait, but I know your heart.
Yeah.
Boom.
Your whitewashed tombs.
You
and
brood of
you've-
vipers."
Yeah, you're committing adultery in your heart, and you're murdering in your heart, and they're all like, "Wait, what? I'm not doing any of that stuff." And that's where it gets really complicated. in the sense of what is this idea of sin, because it really does go back to what is God's, I'll even say God's best for your life. We're making it laws, but really God's like, I have an intent for you,
absolutely.
and I have good for you.
Yeah.
And by the way, you may be able to mask it to the world with your behavior,
Your
but you can't
actions-
hide it from me.
Your actions can be solid, but I think it's that haughty, self-centered, prideful spirit is the thing.
It's all about your intention.
It's the thing that you could be doing all the right stuff, looks fantastic, with haughty eyes, Scripture talks about, with a prideful heart. That's where God's like, that's the number one sin. Like,
Yeah.
I think that is it.
Yeah.
You have elevated yourself to a place. I think blasphemy of the Holy Spirit actually fits in there to a degree.
Yeah.
You've placed yourself on the throne, and God's like, I'm so sorry, because pride is what caused the original fall.
Yep.
And I think God despises pride because of what it actually does. And again, he despises it because of the consequences that we will pay because of that pride.
Well, because it creates separation from him.
The most separation, actually. Yeah.
I actually hate the phrase that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I'm like, sort of. I'm like, sometimes that's the road to heaven. Somebody's like,
exactly.
Sometimes people are just like, no, I was actually trying to do good and it just didn't go well. But
Yeah.
like my heart was really good.
It's almost
When have you ever used that phrase? When have you ever heard that invalidity?
Every time you lead worship, I tell people.
Oh,
That's right.
hey, thank
When
you.
he sings country
praise God.
karaoke.
There are definitely people who are saying like I was meaning to do good, and then all of a sudden like pastors who fall. You know what I mean? Like they're like, I was trying to do good, I was meeting with people, I was doing these things, and all of a sudden I got caught up in this.
Yeah, that's a
and it gets-
terrible
you got
place to
caught.
use that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty jaded in that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can start in a good place and it's just a really bad idea.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
also at the same time, it could be them just lying to themselves. That's why I'm like, it's complicated.
really
Intention
is.
is a weird dynamic.
Well, that's why it's kind
Matters
of
of
funny.
the heart, man.
Because I feel like most of the time that saying is used, they weren't good intentions.
Right.
You know what I mean? We got 10 minutes?
10 minutes.
Yeah.
All right. Let's do
Okay.
it.
Hey guys,
That's fun.
would you rather have infinite Legos or infinite Hot Wheels?
Hot Wheels. No
Really?
question.
Really, I didn't think anybody picked Hot Wheels.
Legos,
I pick
man.
Legos. I
They
pick
get all over
Legos.
the floor.
I
And
know.
I step on them and I get angry.
It's like
yeah.
a fire walk every night. I like it.
Do I get like all the Hot Wheels tracks too? Like all the race tracks mixed with it? I'm just wondering what I'm getting with this. Because
Oh.
all Hot Wheels products, I get to jump the cars, I got the tracks.
Well,
Oh, the motors.
What's funny is we have sets of Hot Wheels that are combined with Legos that actually have the studs on them so you can build stuff.
What?
So, yeah. My boys went through a Hot Wheels phase, and I'm that weird dad that's like, you showed mild interest in this?
Yeah.
I'll spend $1,000.
Like, Dad, we're
We have bins full of the orange tracks.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, everybody get on the roof. We're going to build a ramp off the roof. And so I went nuts.
look what I
'cause
built for you, Dad. We're 22.
I don't care. We have all the speed up spots. It's the greatest.
Oh, those are
thing.
great,
It's
yeah.
so cool.
How many games do you have for your PS5 already?
Oh, I actually bought the stupid membership.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
and
it's-
it comes with so many games.
It's a billion
so many.
games now. Yeah.
I was always a big fan of like the towns, and then I liked having police cars, and I liked having the fire truck, and I liked having the ambulance because I like the story. I like the idea that I'm
Acting it out.
Yeah, so I needed good guy. Otherwise, it's just me and cool cars. I'm like,
Yeah.
I need the opposite. I need
No,
tension. somewhere.
I
Even as a
think-
kid, I want cops chasing me.
I think we should all go to, and I'm dead serious about this. So seriously, we should do this. Go to my house. We should get out all the Hot Wheels,
And you pick.
and we should spend and I mean it, like 2 hours where we just turn into little kids. Because when was the last time you actually made sound effects and played out a real scene? I mean, it's been decades, right?
Since my kids were, I always play with my kids.
I have grandchildren. Happens all
Oh,
the
seriously?
time.
So you still do it?
you do it?
Because it should.
I get down on the
I
floor
love
with
it.
Q
I
all the
used-
time.
that-
and
see,
we
that's-
play
that's
and
wonderful.
Make the
I used to
noises.
get
I love
lost.
it.
I used to get lost in it and not play with Jake anymore, and just like, no, I got it. I'm just like, yeah, hey, where you going? Where you driving?
So-
You
so-
know,
I-
I get
no
so
joke.
involved.
Do you
in
have
it.
car insurance? All right, give me your information. Get out.
I used to do that with Eli sometimes where I'm like, okay, you're doing it wrong. Let me show you. And it's like,
Yeah.
I'm playing.
That is not what that car sounds like.
Did you guys do a draft of the cars? All the cars in the middle, and then you do a draft. Right?
Yeah.
You pick.
We did
all
the thing.
cars in the middle.
We used to
built-
race them down the driveway.
So we
Neighbors.
built a massive track that was huge that had a couple speed up spots, and then we got out all the cars, and one by one we would launch them down the thing, and then we would take them off where they stopped, and then we would just have competitions as to where it would go the
Which,
furthest.
which one rolled the best?
Yeah, we'd
Oh, yeah.
bid, and so it was like you'd pick your 5, and then you'd run it, and then you just set it right
And
next to it,
the
so the
problem
other
with
one
that,
either
it
beat
was
it or
always
not.
like a dump truck because it was so
yeah,
heavy.
because it was head.
Usually
head
it's
weight.
weird. But what's funny is after you've done it a few times, you're like, I know what's going to be. I know it's going to
Yeah.
do it.
I'm old enough that they introduced the rubber wheels in Hot Wheels. Do you remember that era where they got rid of the plastic wheels?
Yeah,
and they
yeah,
went through- that was like fancy. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
These are like tires.
And those were
on it.
great on some tracks. Those
Right.
are really
When
impressive.
I was a Legos kid, I that was my whole
Yeah.
childhood, and I would build them up, and my dad would be like, "Yo, okay, you can display it on your shelf or whatever." I go, "No, I'm gonna make something else." I would take them apart, and I'd make a robot or something else
Yeah.
all the time, and of course, my floor would be covered with them.
Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely covered.
so this is great. My brother-in-law Andy was a total Legos nerd. Built them all to the spec. You know what I mean? Had them all
this
up.
is a great story.
So then Joey, our son, who was older when we got married, goes there and starts playing with them. And then he'd play with the ones that were built, and they'd break, and he'd bust them all into a million pieces. And remember Andy coming home at like 19 and being like, "What?"
Yeah.
And they're like, his mom's like, "It's okay, he's just a kid," and Andy's just like mortified.
Oh, it's mortifying.
So we have kids. They grow up. Joey still likes Legos, starts now building them to spec. Jade and Jake are now little kids, and they play with his. There was one time we're all together, family event. They're playing with something Joey built, and then they break it all to pieces. And Joey goes, "No!" And Andy Lay goes, "So how does that feel?" Held on to that for
What goes around
15
comes around, man.
years, man. How's that feel?
That's amazing.
It's so
amazing.
sad. I still think Legos are one of the greatest things ever invented. They're just so fun. So you're a free for all. Do you like to follow the instructions or build your own?
I'm building my own.
I think I started building, like I would start with the instructions, do that once, and then destroy it pretty quickly and
Yeah.
just do some fun stuff.
I like to build my own.
I still am a bit. I am mostly follow the instructions, and then I really do want to put that on the shelf and keep it. I don't because I have children who they both couldn't care less about instructions, but I still have that where I'm like, if I weren't married, I would have a collection of Legos that would be embarrassing for a man my age.
I'm surprised that
I
has
just-
stopped
I
you.
would.
That's basically
You
the-
probably do
You could
have
do
a
that.
Lego collection
That's
that's,
the-
embarrassing.
Not
for
built.
me.
We have
Oh,
we
built
have drawers
stuff.
full of
Okay.
stuff.
yeah, we have bins.
But the built stuff, I would. My nephew,
That's
who's
the model
21,
plane from 50 years ago. It's the same
Yeah.
concept.
Right.
And honestly, if you've seen some of the newer builds, they're unbelievable.
They're incredible.
The cars, they're like legit. The pistons actually move in the engines. Like
Yeah.
they're
Have you
so,
seen the
I
Bowser?
would get those.
There's a Bowser set.
The
And it's like a-
Bowser, as in Mario.
Yeah, it's a
no, it's
full
funny.
like boss Bowser.
Really?
Yeah,
It's
it's really
I'm,
amazing.
I'm a bigger fan of the characters they put in there and their weapons.
Yeah.
I think they're so cool.
Yep.
All right.
One more.
One
All
more.
right, one more. Would you rather fly based on your fitness level or teleport as fast as you can run?
Oh,
Wait,
shoot!
what?
Teleport as fast as I can run is
Well,
very
I would just
slow.
run. Wait, I don't understand that one. Teleport as fast as you can run?
Well, like I guess like if you're teleporting, but it's
So if I run
But you
here
get-
to the door,
but what if you teleported a mile?
so it'd take me 7 minutes
Same amount
to
of time,
teleport.
but you're not running.
17 minutes.
Yeah.
That's how long it would take me to teleport a mile.
Where'd it go?
Here's the other part.
Why is it so slow?
You're teleporting to Europe, and you're like, where am I during this whole time?
Yeah, it's like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your
What
molecules
was
are
the
just
first
flying.
one? What-
Fly based on your fitness level.
Yeah.
So is that like altitude wise
I don't know.
or speed wise?
I'm in. It's probably speed. That one's not tied to running. So somehow there's a measurement of like, okay, you're this fit. So you have like
cardio?
body fat, maybe
So I
cardio.
can fly as
Yeah,
long
yeah.
as I can run?
So
Well,
yeah.
that would suck if they ran out of that while you're high up. You're like, well, I just went into anaerobic shock, and now I'm falling to
Well,
the ground.
if you fly high enough, you could catch your
Oh.
breath while you're falling.
I
and then
didn't.
fly
I
again.
didn't think about the like. Yeah, it's stressing. It's straining you, and so
Yeah.
you're getting tired. Which I'd be fine with that too, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I like this. I like that.
I'd
idea
rather
more.
fly.
I think just flying because I want to fly.
Flying's a dream.
I think flying's the win.
Yeah.
Flying's the win.
Yeah,
for
teleporting as
I'm
fast as
more
you can
worried
run is
about where
hilarious.
I'm more worried about where I am during teleporting time.
I think the teleportation.
Am I on my phone in another dimension, just looking at stuff?
Sure. Who's the
No-
guy
no
that every
phone.
time, like, there's a Marvel guy, isn't it? That every time he teleports, he like
oh,
turns
that's
into Ghost for a second.
Nightcrawler.
Yeah.
Nightcrawler. He goes down to like Marvel's version of hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be my luck.
Right. Nightcrawler is one of the.
He's one of the
probably
coolest.
is probably my top 3
Dude,
favorites.
he's so cool.
Yeah,
Him and I like Gambit too.
Yeah, might be able to get one more in. It's 4 minutes. What do you think?
Yeah, why not?
All
Let's do
right.
it.
Just
Why
quick.
not? It's not our car.
That's right.
Well, those were like the best ones. Would you rather plan your own birthday or be surprised?
Oh, good. Have you guys ever planned your own birthday? You have.
Every year?
You plan your own birthdays?
No, I was meaning Joe. I mean, kind of like, hey, where do you want to go to dinner? Because that's
Yeah.
birthday for me.
Yeah, I'm trying.
I'm not a surprise guy. Steph did that for my 50th.
Yeah.
I was kind of
Start
mad.
punching people.
Really?
Yeah, I was like, "What did you do?"
Why?
I don't know. It's just
The attention?
weird. Yeah, I don't like. I'm not.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it feels
I'm not
weird.
that guy.
Yeah, I'm very shy too.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you think? I'll tell you mine at the end. What do you got?
Well, we all know yours.
We know yours.
I do like a good surprise.
No,
though.
no. You love a good surprise, but you like entertaining other people more.
I
Right.
do.
So you would plan your birthday thinking like we're all
You
going
want
to have
Chicago
a lot of
dogs?
fun.
I'll make
Not
you
just-
Chicago dogs.
It's your birthday would be like I'll make everybody
in
Chicago
Chicago.
dogs.
Now I
Joe.
want a Chicago.
Because
We're
you
gonna
want
golf. We're gonna smoke cigars.
Yeah, you want to bring everyone along
Yeah.
for the party. It's not so I think you would as much as the surprise is fun, you'd be concerned the whole time like, is everybody else having fun?
I would let you and Lisa plan my surprise party.
We would plan very different surprise
Yeah, I
parties.
was gonna say
She,
those
know-
would be.
she still would acquiesce to the things I liked. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
She would
for
still,
sure.
She would still
Yeah.
do
to
it.
do it in the driveway.
Yeah.
Because we planned like
exactly.
the Vegas trip.
Yes.
Like we planned that.
Yeah.
Were there any surprises during that trip?
No.
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 Josh
Gary,
singing
Gary
at
and
the lounge.
Ashley,
Oh.
Gary and Ashley showing up was the surprise.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I remember
yeah.
that.
That was cool.
I remember
That's
that.
true.
What was I gonna say? What would you pick?
Probably surprised because I never really planned my birthday.
Yeah.
We'll be like, we'll go to a dinner or something. But as for being surprised, like I've never really had a surprise birthday. So I think I'm like, yeah, that'd be fun.
I got massively
I had
surprised.
one time. One time
I've
you guys
had
were
one
involved.
also.
Bees.
And then he silly stringed me.
And yelled
got-
bees.
I got massively surprised twice within the last 12 months, and I wasn't really. I mean, you know, you're happy at the end, but in the moment, I'm like, what the?
Was it the last birthday here?
Was the
one
last
here?
birthday here,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
when I finished my PhD, Joey Medina planned a surprise party
Yeah.
for me at the restaurant.
That is
How
very
about
fun.
you, Ryan? While we're out of time.
I don't know. I actually, I every year I think I want to plan a really fun big thing. I never do. One of these years I really want to do something fun. Although like what I want to do, which is tough, is I want to like pay for everybody to go somewhere with me. It's just every year I'm like I don't want to spend $12,000 on my own party.
right,
Like it's freaking
Yeah.
expensive.
I
But
kind of want to do a taco truck throwdown for my birthday one year.
I've actually done. Oh, the throwdown would be
Yeah.
fun. I've done a taco truck.
Yeah.
I think one of the years, and I wanted to do it. It was the year COVID hit, so I couldn't. Because and Ashley and I were planning it. Is I wanted to do a like get a house on the coast. Like I'd pay for it, and we would golf like at the different fun like coastal courses. Everybody would have to pay for their own golf, but I'll pick up the house, so it's just food and golf on everybody else. And we were planning it. We actually had the house because we found it's on a golf course. We stayed in it, and I'm like, we're gonna do this for my party. And then COVID hit.
Were you the one saying that you can rent like abandoned track cars?
Yeah, we're doing it on Wednesday. No, Thursday.
Oh,
We're
what?
doing it on Thursday. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's
We
awesome.
rented the rail cars.
You should use your GoPro.
yeah.
That'd be so
It's
fun.
not a bad idea. I think I will record it.
You
though.
should.
With the I'll actually fly the drone with me.
Oh, that'd be great.
All right.
Because it's a
No.
no.
So you can rent those. We got they're electric.
Oh.
They're actually assisted pedal cars. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Awesome.
It'll be fun.
Well, thanks for joining us on You Won't Hate It. I'm Josh.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Floyd.
I'm Joe.
We'll see you back in a month.